Hello and welcome to the second part of the Oregon Community Development Block Grant Application Webcast series.
Within the second module, we'll be talking more about all the processes and all activities that would be enhancing your application readiness to proceed, along with the program management planning, which will be incorporated into the project as award is made, along with the a glimpse of the electronic application system so that you are aware of what you are going to be interacting as you are moving forward with your application through our Business Oregon portal. Just a little sneak preview through the agenda. We will be covering a little thing about things to consider before applying, significant changes within the 2023, the project management plan and why that's important, application and the scoring criteria, technical assistance and how can you tap into that resource, and getting yourself organized to move yourself ready to apply, and then along with the resources and guidance material that would help you in finalizing your next step in applying for funding. The first step, as we are considering the application and yourself as the applicant before you're moving forward for CDBG program, is for sure the eligibility criteria. Are you a city or a county that is located in a non-entitlement area? We talked about non-entitlement area within Module 1, and I want to make sure that you are able to look into that. And again, the resource that we are going to use throughout this presentation from Module 1 and Module 2 will be available through our current method of distribution that's located within our website. And the next thing is, does the project fit the priority and parameter sets its most current method of distribution? It goes back is your project satisfying a national objective? Which national objective would that be? What is the type of your project? Again, I'm going to take you and remind you to go back to the method of distribution. It has a very handy chart that you can look into to see the type of project and what kind of national objective that it needs to satisfy. So first of all, you need to see if that's even satisfying, your project is satisfying a national objective. The next part, if first two questions yes, then let's go to the next question. Is your project ready to proceed? Readiness to proceed means you know the scope of the project. You have all your ducks in a row, meaning that if a project needs a particular amount of funds and you are intending to apply for CDBG for a fraction of your project cost, have you secured the other part of the funds? Have you identified the timeline that would be suiting your project and the timeline that is applicable to all of your funding that you're pursuing? Those are the kind of complexity that we need to make sure that you think and you go through and make sure that you have it all processed. And if your answer of those three main questions are yes, then you are eligible and your project is eligible to pursue CDBG program or to CDBG funding. One good resources that we can offer to you, we have our regional development officers within your areas that you'll be able to tap into the brainstorm on this eligibility. The regional development officer will be able to connect you with our CDBG project managers that would work directly with you to identify whether your project is eligible with the funding criteria and identify the readiness to proceed. So this is another thing to consider and prepare before you're applying. It is a simple registration within the sam.gov requirement, but it could be a little bit time consuming due to the process. So all applicants that are interested in pursuing federally funded programs is required to register within sam.gov. And we just want to make sure most of you would have an existing record or registration within the SAM.gov, and make sure that registration is active. This, if you have a registration and they're active, and at the time when you're applying, what is going to be required from you would be the printout of that registration. And then you will hear the code of unique entity ID. This is a unique ID number that is assigned by SAM.gov system, in which you will have a particular unique ID, and if you have registered, you will have it. It will be in your registration information. So here's a little resource for you to check whether you are registered or not, or if you are not, then you'll be able to figure out on how can you register. One thing that has been updated since the past, I want to say 3-4 years, is that entity who are registering within SAM needs to identify an authorized entity administration, and that person needs to be basically verified through a signed notarized letter from the entity, and submit that to sam.gov. So that's a little bit of an extra step to do that. So just give a heads up. It might take a little bit of a time. It will take a couple of days or more for sam.gov to process your registration. There will be some communication that you will receive. However, we are going to make sure that at the time of application, you want your registration to be active, and you have a unique entity ID number that you will be able to complete and put within your application to show. Another item to consider before applying is the recipient obligation, meaning when you are applying and you're receiving funding and you're intending to pursue federal funds, there are some obligations that's attached to that. Federal requirement, state requirements will start to be invoked as you are pursuing funding. There's just different level in the activities that would invoke a particular federal and state requirements. So we just want you to be aware of what those are as you are moving forward in identifying or developing your project, and how this federal and state requirements will be impacting your local capacity in not only administering the funding, but also managing the project that you are intending to pursue. So aware that local capacity will be impacted in additional work. Do you have that? Do you need assistance? What kind of assistance do you need? Start thinking and add that into your material to consider. And then identifying what are eligible activities, not eligible activities, and how would you be able to set your budget in certain ways so that you will remain to be in compliance to ensure that federal requirement is not being you're not jeopardizing the federal requirements versus what can you do with the additional funding that you may have from a different match funding that may be able to fund activity that's not eligible with the CDBG program. This kind of understanding of what's eligible, not eligible will be very much in the weeds kind of work. However, again, I'm going to remind you to tap into our resource. Again, we have our CDBG project manager, Shelby Gonzalez, that will be able to sit with you and go through to see what are your activities and also help you figure out what would be the best way of developing your budget so that you would set yourself correctly and stay within compliance. And then I'm going to talk about a little bit local citizen participation. Citizen participation is one of the federal requirements that will be imposed on every single one of CDBG project awards. Basically, it is a requirement that the city or county must complete a public hearing process to properly inform your citizen in community of your intent in pursuing the funding. The citizen participation requirement includes publishing and posting public hearing notice. There's a particular time that you need to satisfy. If the notice will be published, it must be published at least 7 days in advance of the public hearing. You need to count 7 days from the days of when you either publish your notice. And if you are posting your notice, you must post this at least 10 days. We are going to ask for your affidavit of publication, and if you are posting it, we are going to ask for your certification of posting by from the official of the city. In your certification, you need to identify, if you are posting it, you need to identify the location, the length of time, and who did it, and have it signed by an authorized by city officials. You need to also provide information of the date when the public hearing is going to happen, and when are they going to be allowed to submit a comment in written, or if they would like to attend, they will be able to attend the meetings. And in the information that is going to be required to disclose in this meeting is that you need to disclose the amount of CDBG funds expected to make available for that particular year, the range of activities that may be undertaken with grant funds, and the estimated amount of grant funds proposed to be used for the project. And then and whether or not there's any displacement that would be affected by the particular project. So this is also an opportunity for the city councils or public hearings together if there are any community needs, community development needs that the citizen thinks is the higher priority than what that's intended. So basically the city and or the county would be asking for public comment should there be any concern or any other higher priority needs that needs to be addressed by the city and pursue CDBG for it. We will guide you through the process before you're posting your notice. Do keep in contact with our CDBG project manager or regional development officers. We'll be able to make sure that the process is done correctly.
As a basic thing for any project that's moving forward for funding, project development is the core of the successfulness of a project funding and project completion. Project development consists of understanding what's your need, what you're trying to address, understanding your local capacity, understanding your not only local administrative capacity, but also financial capacity, understanding your timeline, what does that entails, when do you need the project to be done, and understanding, the cost and how is that impacting the affordability of the project for the community's budget. And also, usually we know that lately the cost of a project has been gone up constantly, and CDBG may not be the only program that you are going to be administering for the project. The question is, each funding program comes with a different timeline and requirement of when you're supposed to apply, when you're supposed to secure the funding. So understanding the timeline for the funding, the timeline for the project needs, and how to match that up together and to see whether or not you have an idea when you're supposed to do what when in getting all your required steps to get your project to be ready to proceed. Ready once it's funded, your project can move forward and expended quickly. As a quick resource for you to get your hands on when we're talking about all different activities that we can do to help and work together with you early on to identify or maybe work on the project development with you and identifying eligibility. I kept mentioning to tap into our resources through our regional development officers within your area. Here's a link for you to go into our website so you'll be able to click into your area to identify who is the regional development officer for your area, and then start your discussion and conversation to brainstorm about your project. And usually our regional development officers will be looping our CDBG or calling our CDBG project manager into the discussion, and hopefully we'll be able to start seeing a follow-up actions to reach a particular level or to reach your ability to apply for the funding.
So to summarize what we've talked about in the past few slides, for you to get yourself organized, make sure you know your scope of work, you know your timeline of needs, you know the sequencing steps that need to be done to make your project ready to proceed. You analyze the cost for reasonableness, doing all your due diligence. You identify the cost of your project and the sources of the funding that would help or that you can pursue in funding the project. And then pursue the funding, because you will see that there is different timeline that would apply for different funding programs. So pursue that before you're pursuing CDBG, because you are going to be asked to provide a proof that you have secured your other fundings that's needed for the project. So as you are working on through this, work with our regional development officers and CDBG project manager to hone down in your determination of eligibility. And then when everything is ready, again, we're going to use the same term, your ducks in a row, and you got green light from our regional development officers and CDBG project manager, go ahead and proceed with initiate process to apply for CDBG by completing the intake form. Keep in mind the CDBG application timeline. We have two timelines, two application rounds, one in spring starting February and in April 30th. The second one is in fall starting July 1st and September 30th. Again, that's based on availability of funding. And so do think about the application timeline and how that's in line to your project's timeline.
For the highlight for the program years of 2023, we don't have that large or big of differences from 2022. Just want to remind you that there is a set-aside funding for planning grants, economic and community development planning grants, and this is applicable to those communities that are 51% or more low moderate income. This is to satisfy a national objective of low moderate income area wide. Is for you to be able to access planning funding for a few different, which we think is quite important things, for the needs of downtown revitalizations planning, for the needs of disaster and pandemic economic impact analysis. This two component is very much needed right now, especially with the changing in the characteristics of economy and people working from home and whatever else. We are wanting to have an opportunity for communities to tap into and see if there's any way, or if use it as a resource for you to reinvent or shedding a little bit more light on how you are wanting to maneuver through a change in your community and where do you want to go from there. The other thing also is the broadband planning grants. this is another one of the planning grants that would be useful for your communities to fine-tune your broadband needs, identifying what are the needs, and getting yourself ready to move for a bigger funding that's coming down through the federal broadband improvement activities. And I know Business Oregon from the broadband office has done and worked a lot of different programs that they are launching pretty soon. So take this opportunity to use this broadband planning grant to get yourself all readied up, to get your project ready to proceed, and to queue in for a bigger fund for the implementation on the broadband plan that you have done with this funding. So that's another opportunity that you can look at. Lastly, there's the stormwater management plan. This particular document is very much recommended by EPA and DEQ, and we know that there's not that much funding available. We believe that stormwater management planning is very much important for communities, especially wastewater system, to be able to manage their capacity, and ensure there is no I&I issues, or I&I capacity, collection capacity, anything that would be able to possibly help out in regards of possible risk of flooding in the event of heavy rain and the failure of the stormwater system. So there is an opportunity for you if you're interested in that. The next thing is the introduction of new federal requirement within 2023. This particular requirement is in effect as of November 14, 2022, that any construction project awarded after November 14, 2022 would be subject to Build America, Buy America Act. So at this moment, our last award for CDBG was done before November 14, so anything in 2022 is not going to be affected by this, but all construction projects awarded within 2023 on will be subject to Build America, Buy America Act. So keep that in mind as you are developing your project, especially if you are pursuing construction funding from CDBG. Put into consideration on the cost or of additional cost that this particular this BABA requirement would be impacting, alongside with the capacity administration in getting all the documentation for this act. So the other thing is Section 3 requirement. We are no longer requiring Section 3 plan for all of CDBG award. However, Section 3 requirement is morphing specifically for construction project only. We have released a set of information webinar along with the documentation guides within our website that you will be able to go into and learn more about Section 3. We actually did this introduction of the Section 3 requirement back in spring of 2022. So just want to remind you that this requirement applies, and to make sure that you get to know what this requirement all about and get ready to implement it as you have a construction project. Lastly, highlights for 2023 about technical assistance. This is nothing changed from last year, but we want to make sure that for you to be able to pace your timeline so that you'll be able to access this a service of tapping into our technical assistance in your application, in your process and completing your application. Remember, the application period starts is 3 months long. And then what we're trying to say is that we would like to make sure that you're aware that there is 4 weeks deadline, is a deadline that is set 4 weeks before the application's submittal date for the technical assistance request. The reasoning is because there are a lot of application, and it takes about 10 days for us to review each application. That's I'm just talking conservatively. And if everybody is submitting their request for technical assistance the last month of the application round, meaning all come in April, we may not be able to finish all of them, so it will not be useful at the end. So what we're asking is, when you are intending to pursue CDBG, please think about it early on, get yourself ready, and the sooner that you can get your draft of application ready, like the second month of the application round, do tap into the technical assistance service so that we will be able to work with you and quickly review your application for any deficiencies and provide any comments and suggestions to improve your application competitiveness. So make use of this opportunity. You'll be able to see it more on how to do that as we're working on the electronic application presentation closer to the end of this module. With this opportunity, we would like to highlight the importance of project management planning in the project design, development, and implementation, and how you're presenting the application is affecting your application scoring. While in the past, CDBG program concentrate or focus more on the compliance with federal rules, we are trying to implement more in balancing the compliance management with the performance management in order to achieve the program national objective faster. The key point is timeliness of the expenditure of the award. Therefore, a tighter project management focus through different layout of project management, and it needs to be actually designed from the beginning, from the start of the application, from the budget, understanding, creating a schedule of activity that has an estimated start date and completion date, along with the contracting, understanding when can you have a quick head start as the contract is being developed, or the contract is being finalized and constructed, and then from the contract, then we draw on what project budget and the schedule that you've provided in the application and create a quarterly draw schedule and report in which we can then create an interim milestones. So in the implementation phase, the quarterly performance report that we are going to create is going to have a comparison on how much has been drawn versus how much has been budgeted, and then identifying the accomplishment from the milestones that was set. And then from that, we assess to see if there are anything that we can do, that we can work with the awardees in getting the project moving as scheduled, if that is the case. So the whole idea is to be more proactive in identifying in any possible potential issues in the project management and the flow of the project. So the project can be completed as scheduled and able to draw the funding as rapidly within the 24 months times allowed. So one of the several essential elements of a project management plan is a set of tasks, creating interim milestones or accomplishment that you would allow your progress to be tracked. So it's trackable milestones. These milestones will allow you to track whether you're making adequate progress against a schedule that will ensure completion within 2 years time frame. Again, you're not required to identify the interim milestone as a part of the application. This will occur after your selection. So prior to your contract execution, you will be required to identify milestone by quarter as part of your project management plan. In your application, you are going to be requested to provide a work plan with a set of data and accomplishment. In this exercise, after a project is selected to be awarded by CDBG, from that project work plan, project work plan that you submit with the application will be used as a part of the milestones, in that you can break down into quarterly based accomplishment goals. So again, we are looking at the completion of a project within 24 months of completion timeline. So this quarterly accomplishment report is going to be spread only for within the 24 months period. So you may be familiar with how general contractor lays out the construction flowchart or critical path. Then you place the critical activities into appropriate quarters, identifying the completion quarter or percentage of completion. So again, milestones and draws are linked, because within that quarterly report, not only you will accomplish the milestone accomplishment goals, but you will be asked to project on the expenditure that you are going to draw within that time schedule. All projects awarded by CDBG funding will be asked to develop both draw schedule and the milestones and accomplishment by quarters. They will become very critical components of the project management plan. Once we receive the proposed project management plan, we will review it to determine that the project management plan reflects adequate understanding of the project element and the work task involved, that the appropriate sequencing of critical activities, for example, environmental clearance before expenditure of funds is there. You're understanding the processes and when the critical activities or milestones are identified with reasonable time. Alignment of estimated expenditure with work proposed, and likelihood that the project can be completed within the project time frame. So all those combined into our full review to ensure that the proposed project management plans are reasonable and achievable. Our agency will create a risk management of each project based on the plan and other elements of the application to determine if the project needs assistance. We will update the risk assessment each quarter based on the progress you achieved. This assessment can affect the level of oversight and assistance that OBDD provides. So we are using this as a tool to basically manage our projection of expenditure, and also to help the funding recipient or the awardees to ensure the timeliness in moving the project forward and expand the funding within the 24 months allotted. So you can start doing the project management and actually lay down the groundwork for the project management at the same time when you are developing your application. By developing the budget and schedule of the work, you are creating a start of the project management. Start with communicating with your team about budget and activity schedule with a realistic time that would be required to accomplish those, and set it up appropriately. Work backwards when you're talking about the completion deadline as we're forward in scheduling the work activities to achieve that. So that you can be sure that you have adequate time to complete the tasks and activities so that the project itself will be able to be accomplished and completed within 24 months of the project completion time. Next, look at the critical path activities. Critical path activities are activities that affect the schedule because it needs to be done first before things can happen. This is just a part of the domino effect of the work. So, for example, that would be the environmental review and the environmental clearance. That particular activity must be done, must happen before a construction starts. So do look at that and highlight it, give appropriate time, and work with appropriate team to complete that task. And then lastly, make sure to reconcile budget draws to task schedule. So budget draws itself, you are going to be projecting how much is going to be drawn within a particular timeline. Make sure you can reconcile that. Is that still on schedule? Is that not on schedule? Identify why is that not on schedule. That would help you in managing your project and be able to complete, to have an idea of what is the stumbling block that needs to be taken care of. Is it something that that is within your internal control, your contractors, or is it something that we can work from the state level to help also? For CDBG program, the application is a tool for us to know more about your project. It is actually something that we are going to use to rate and rank us to score and rate and rank your project and use it as a decision for award. So it is important for you to articulate your project well enough in a very descriptive way, knowing that your audience that will be reviewing your application are a group of people who are not familiar with your area nor your project or the type of issues that you are facing. So there are parts of the application that are designed for you to better highlight the project. So in the our scoring criteria, you will be able to see that we are scoring it into 5 different components, 5 different topics. 1 is the need, 2 is feasibility, readiness, financing, and capacity. You will be able to see in the scoring criteria what that means and what are the scoring that would relate to each component. So use that as a tool for you in developing your application and understanding what was it that you will need to gain more points. You know, one of the example is capacity. If you are a city or county that has never worked on CDBG in the past, you may not have knowledge on what CDBG requirements all about. The scoring criteria will be able to show you that you will be able to receive a better score if you are actually working with somebody with an organization that's actually familiar with CDBG requirement as a grant administrator. So do look at that. There are some in and outs that would be useful for you to determine how you are shaping your project and presenting it in a way that we will be understanding it and we'll be able to use it to score your project appropriately. Within the project readiness criteria, we're highlighting the projects that are ready to go, meaning ready to proceed once the project is awarded. And those projects would be addressing all components that will be considered as time-consuming factors. So we can view this project readiness into many different angles. So let's look at an example of programmatic angle. Points are given to those projects that have done all what we call the first draw requirement, all those documents that is a little bit time consuming and in preparing because it's programmatically required documents. So such documents are limited English proficiency plan, fair housing resolution, section 504 self-evaluation checklist, Those are the sample of the documents that is what we call the programmatic required time-consuming steps. From a different angle, we're looking at the project itself, whether or not, a condition where the project has completed all the planning document that's required by a regulatory agency to move forward to a next level of the project. So, for example, regulatory agency has reviewed your planning document, your design, and that put you to be ready to move forward to construction right away after award. The other angle that we can look at is through the project management side, is how well do you set your work plan and your goals and your milestones. From there, we will be able to see how well you have looked into the processes, and then you've set a clear and reasonable timelines, and we know that you are able to control and aware of the time limitation of the 24 months completion time, and use it as your source or your beginning of the project management plan document that will be split into quarterly reports. When we're reviewing your financial records, what we're looking for is there sufficient funding to ensure an adequate budget for future operation, maintenance, and replacement? Is there sufficient revenue or plan to increase revenue to sustain newly completed system, if applicable? And has the project gone through a great consideration in the setup, securing all other necessary funding coverage of costs necessary to ensure completion and federal compliance? When we're doing this review, who do we review? So there are different type of project will put a different point of players to be reviewed. So if an applicant is the owner and operator of the facility, and the applicant's financial record will be analyzed for ability to service and debt. However, if an applicant is applying on behalf of nonprofit or other public entity, and the nonprofit or other public entity will be the owner and operator of the facility, and the applicant has no responsibility in providing the service to be provided by the proposed project, then the nonprofits and other public entities' financial record will be analyzed for the ability to service debt. Now, if an applicant is responsible in providing said service, I'm going to use the example such as mental health, whether or not the applicant is contracting out the operation of the facility to a nonprofit or other public entity, the applicant's financial record will be analyzed for the ability to service debt. We also would like to see whether there is a need for CDBG funds. Is there a great need for assistance, and assess the financial impact if the project, if not receiving funding from CDBG? So if there is a direct and clear evidence that shows grant fund is not needed because you have sufficient revenue, you have sufficient funding that you can use for this project, and the project can and will be carried out by the applicant whether or not the award is granted, then the applicant will not be recommended for funding. Subsequently, it's the same situation for public works in relation to the user rate and the threshold rate criteria. Water and wastewater final design and or construction grant applicants undergo financial review to ensure that the monthly user rate at construction completion of the proposed meet the threshold rate criteria. If they are not, and they're not, we don't see any schedule that it will reach a threshold criteria at the end of project construction completion of the project, the application will not be recommended for funding. For projects such as housing rehabilitation project will be evaluated by the gap identified between nonprofits' balance of available funds consisting of cash on hand, including any prior open CDBG grants, and any other funds readily available to carry out the proposed owner-occupied housing rehabilitation program, and the grant request to meet the identified need. And the regional housing rehabilitation program will also be evaluated by number of open CDBG grants for the sub-grantees and the nonprofit who are currently managing, and also the total unexpended balance. These are general guidance on the documents needed and review requirements. Questions regarding financial needs and financial record review should be directed to the Regional Development Officer and the CDBG project manager as you are working with them in the project development. I would like to point you to chapter of method of distributions, specifically from chapter 9, 10, 11, and 12 for each project type for the detailed criteria of what is the eligibility and the financial review, depth of financial review for each category. Some more points on scores for match funds, person served, and capacity. While matching funds is not required, higher points are given based upon the percentage of committed or secured match funds in the project compared to the CDBG grant requested. So do look at those scoring and see how you can gain your point from any additional match funds that you put into the project. We also look into the percentage of low moderate income population to be served by the proposed project, and there are criteria of scoring level, scoring criteria for that. For housing rehabilitation, all eligible owners must be a low moderate income, therefore higher points may be given based upon the total number of units which are reasonably expected to be rehabilitated during the course of a project. For capacity, applicant with grant administration plan and history that demonstrate grant awards and project and have the experience on successful management experience will receive a higher point. In addition to applicant capacity, for housing rehabilitation program, applicant must provide a list of all open CDBG funded housing rehabilitation grant within the certified sub-grantees region, where the sub-grantees is responsible in carrying out the grant activities. So in effort to geographically distribute funding throughout Oregon, points may be possible depending on how recently an applicant received a CDBG award. In this section, we are going to talk a little bit more about the CDBG electronic application through our Business Oregon portal. CDBG application consists of two major steps in the flow. The first one is the intake. It is a preliminary application that gathers necessary project info for the agency to determine if or when an application may be invited to apply. At the time you work with the Regional Development Officer in your area and the CDBG project manager, and you came to the point where you are ready to move forward to pursue CDBG funding, your RDO or CDBG project manager will provide you a link to the Business Oregon portal. And once that is provided, you will be registering to get into, basically to register to the Business Oregon portal to access the intake form. Once that intake is completed and submitted to Business Oregon, along with the first public hearing documentation, the intake will be routed internally for peers review. Upon completion of the peers review process, an invitation to apply will be released for the applicant to proceed in completing the application, the appropriate application for the project type. You will see that into the email, you will receive an email that contains a link. Again, that link will take you to the Business Oregon portal, the same portal that you have registered. Use that same access. Once you've logged in, you will be able to access the application form. As mentioned in the previous slide, when your project is ready to move forward for funding application, our RDOs and our CDBG project manager will provide you a link to the Business Oregon portal. Along with the link, we will provide you a quick cheat sheet on how to navigate through the online platform. Business Oregon portal is created and developed within the Salesforce environment. For the best experience and maximize performance of this platform, we recommend you to access it through Google Chrome. As you may already have a registration to this system, or you may not, but a quick list of the items that you will need to register within Business Oregon portal is the name and email of the person who will complete the intake and the application. Please remember, the access to the online application will be given to the person who submitted the intake form, and that person must be representing the eligible applicant. It may not be their contractors or their consultant. It has to be directly from the eligible applicant, which are the cities or counties of non-entitlement community. Next thing's the name of your organizations and your organization's federal TIN number. Once you get into Business Oregon portal, you will see this screen. To start a new intake, click on the New Intake tab on the top left corner of the screen. As soon as you get into the New Intake, you will see a page such this, and now you can proceed with completing the intake. Should you want to stop in the middle of the form, please make sure you hit Save Progress button on the bottom right of each screen. The system will save your work in progress and you will be able to access it again. To access the intake that you previously saved and left to go back to continue, all you need to do is log in back to Business Oregon portal, and you will see the main page. Click on Edit Intake on the top bar and select your project application by clicking the link within the section column. Then you can go proceed and continue on the intake, completing the intake form. Once you complete and submit the form, the intake is no longer editable, and the link under Action column will change to Submitted. You will be able to see the status of that intake by clicking, if you go into the Business Oregon portal main screen, you will be able to see the intake status information by clicking Application button above on the top tab and click the blue link under Project column for corresponding project. Should you reach to the point where your intake is submitted and you would like to edit it, immediately contact your CDBG project manager or regional development officer to help you out, because there is a possibility for you to edit your intake form as long as it's before it's been routed out for peers review process. So if you can catch it the earliest possible time, you can contact your CDBG project manager or the RDO, Regional Development Officer, to help out. Once the intake is processed and moved for approval to invite application, invitation to apply will be sent to the application through the appointed contact the same person who filled out the intake form. So keep in mind, as you are deciding who will be the point of contact accessing the Business Oregon portal and work from the intake, and will be completing the application process too. As usual, you can always start your application, your intake form, and stop in the middle. Please make sure that you hit save, and you will still be able to continue your work. So don't you worry, it will not be missing. A very quick guide emphasizing the information provided earlier. Invitation to apply email will be sent to the same person who sent who submitted the intake form. And that person must be the city representative or city staff. And along, I'm pretty sure subsequently that person must be registered for Business Oregon portal. When you receive the application, the invitation to apply in your email, read your email very carefully as it will give you a couple links. First is to access the Business Oregon portal. The second link will take you to the application form. So do look at that. If you click on it, it will take you to the Business Oregon portal and it will take you to the application form. For spring application round, the deadline for submission of the applications is on or before April 30th, 2023. For fall round, the deadline is on or before September 30th, 2023. Technical assistance will be provided 4 weeks before application deadline. Please allow 10 business days to complete the review, and keep in mind there may be a number of applications. So plan accordingly. The sooner you are working and drafting your application, the better that we can have more time to work with you in reviewing your application.
Now that you're into the electronic application platform, we just want to remind you to be ready with your documentation, with your material. Please also rest assured that you can start the application and then stop and save and resume back once you're ready to do so. You will notice that there are some fields that have been pre-populated from the information provided in the intake form, and do look at those information and review them and see if there's any update that you need to do, and you can update that easily in the form. Tables within this online application need to have a little bit more careful attention. Please remember to click Save after you complete a table that has that button on the bottom right side of the table. With that said, there are some tables that would not have that button available. In that case, as soon as you click a different tab, the information that you entered will be saved. There are a couple of the tables that would require you to enter 0 if your answer is none or not applicable. Those are tables within Section 2 under National Objective, under Amount Money Leverage Table and Ethnicity Table. Please read the instruction carefully. For the signature of the application, it will be done via DocuSign. Please make sure you provide the name and title of person that is authorized to sign on behalf of the applicant along with his or her email address. If you are the person completing the application, you will be CC'd on the email from DocuSign to the authorized signer. You will have a view-only right to the DocuSign document. Please do not forward that email to the authorized signer, as they must open their direct email from DocuSign that has been authenticated specifically for the authorized signer's email.
The CDBG application has a specific designated area of which attachment can be uploaded. The location of this attachment manager page is all the way at the end of the application forms. So as you work through all the sections, you will see a little blue document icon that will give you an indication of possible document that you need to prepare to upload at the end of the form. All attachments listed in the document manager are considered required, understanding that there are some instances where attachments are not applicable for your project. Since the system cannot differentiate that, the way around it would be uploading a page with NA written on it. Although not required, a quick indicator why NA would be also helpful. At the end of the form, you will find a couple buttons that you can select. The first button is called Request Assistance, which we will talk a little more in the upcoming slides. Again, I'm going to give a hint. 4 weeks before the application deadline, this is a technical assistance button. And then the second button is called Submit. This button is final submission of the application. A quick hint and guide on how to continue or edit your application. Just like editing process in the intake form, as soon as you register, as soon as you log into Business Oregon portal, to edit or continue working on your application, please click on the tab called Application and click the blue link under Action column for the corresponding project application.
As promised, a little bit more about application technical assistance. It is that button that you will find in the page, in the last page of the electronic application form under the attachment managers page. What this button do, it will notify us that you are requesting technical assistance, which what we would do would be we are going to review your application for completion and provide you comments on any improvements and suggestions that we found as we reviewed your application. This service will be provided up to 4 weeks before the application deadline. But please allow us about 10 days to do the full review. And keep in mind, there are a number of other applications, so do plan your time accordingly. The earlier you drafted your application, the better, because then we will be able to provide you a quicker comments and suggestion, and you will be able to edit your application and hit submit button within the deadline time. So you have reached the end of module 2 and the end of the webcast series. Congratulations and thank you very much for your attention. We hope that you learn a little bit more about CDBG program and our application process. Upon completion of viewing both modules, you'll be receiving certification of completion, which will be needed should you be applying for CDBG in this round or the upcoming fall round. This certification will be required to be uploaded with your application. As a parting reminder, we have a wonderful regional development service team out there with our regional development officer. Please look into our website to see who is your nearest regional development officer for your area, along with our CDBG project manager who are ready to work with you and prep you through the project development journey. Thank you again, and should you have any questions, feel free to email us at cdbghelp@oregon.gov.